Hello and welcome to Jay Hutch Talks Too Much. I'm Jay Hutch. Joining me today is special guest Conan Neutron. We are going to be talking about the Last Picture Show. He's already celebrating, which is fantastic. I like to see that. This is the first show back from a fairly long break. We were away since mid-December, so excited to be back. I want to introduce my guest. Conan is a musician in the band Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. Has a podcast where he has conversations with musicians called Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal and Protonic Reversal. I apologize, and is on the podcast Movie Night Extravaganza. Welcome to the show, Conan.
Thanks for having me, man. Happy to do it. Mr. Bogdanovich is a legend, and RIP to a legend. And this is a movie I like quite a bit. So please be doing it always. And I always like to say, whenever someone mentions like, "Oh, I'm a musician," it's like, yeah, I bet you couldn't tell by like the 45 guitars that are in the background. But
it's a pretty awesome setup you have, I have to say. It's pretty cool. Well, at some point, maybe we should, maybe not tonight, but at some point we should talk about music, because it's definitely a big interest of mine too.
Know a thing or two about a thing or two.
Oh, and I'll also just learned the other day on the Movie Night Extravaganza podcast that Conan once opened for Dennis Kucinich.
Yeah, that's right. I did. Yeah. That's I've opened for a lot of bands over the years, some of which are notable people, but he's the only presidential candidate that I have opened for.
Now,
that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Did you open for him while he was running for president? What was I just?
Yeah. So this is 2004. This is 2004. The Democratic primary, the one that Howard Dean ended up becoming like the populist.
Right.
Kucinich had like the stronger progressive platform, but Howard Dean had like the momentum. See, it's not as impressive as when my friends in the Thermals actually opened for Bernie, like with a full band set, like in a stadium, and that was where the bird showed up. If you remember when the bird showed up,
yes,
and he's like, "Oh, it's a bird here," and everyone was like,
"That's right, I remember that." Yeah,
all of the memes for like about 20. That was the same night that the Thermals played with them. But yeah, just I was at the time. I was lead organizer for an organization called Bands Against Bush.
Nice.
Bands Against Bush, because that was our biggest problem at the time.
Yes.
Yeah, and
all those carefree days, eh?
Yeah, and there was a lot of petition driving and voter registration, things along those lines, organizational stuff, and at a community event, I did indeed open for Dennis Kucinich.
That is awesome.
Nice guy, really nice fella.
I'm sure he seems like a nice guy. Like a nice guy.
Very funny too. Like I didn't expect him to be quite as funny as he was, but
that would surprise me as well. Doesn't look like necessarily the funniest guy in the world, but
except for when he switches and then it's like, oh, it's all serious now. Okay,
right. Now we're talking about politics.
Fair enough.
Okay,
which I'm the same way, so I get it.
Sure. You turn on a dime.
Exactly.
I realize as I'm looking at myself, I'm not going for a Peter Bogdanovich look right now, but I feel like I'm almost.
You've even with like the shirt collar where it's like formal but not quite. Like you seem like you need like maybe a cool jacket.
I should have worn my ascot tonight. Is clearly
ascot. He did bring big ascot energy.
He did.
That was not necessarily cool.
No. But he had to distinguish himself somehow in the later half of his career.
I think the later half of his career is great, where he basically was like, "I'm a character actor now. I do cool character actor stuff." And it's like, why not? Absolutely, like fantastic.
Right on. He was a good actor, and actually recently I saw him. I don't know if you ever saw. Did you see that when they put out that new Orson Welles,
The Other Side of the Wind? Yeah. I thought that was utterly fascinating.
Yeah.
And I like the documentary. You're gonna miss me when I'm gone. I think.
Yes.
Even more.
Yeah,
but I liked like it's sort of like it's like Orson's idea of like French New Wave or something. Like it was, as a movie, it was still cool to see. I mean, I like Orson Welles' stuff, but yeah, like the whole thing about like him like filming all that stuff and like like the whole like just bizarre story. And it seemed like that whole movie was as much a party as a plan.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
But I
liked it for years.
Yeah, just keep the party going. Do a couple of these freaking We should sell no wine before it's time. Commercials, just
Oh yeah. Ah, the
absolutely
French.
wasted. What I love about that those are the internet too is you see the setup where people are just like, all right, hi.
Yeah, if
And then
people,
remember, line, okay,
if people watching have not seen the Orson Welles outtakes from the French wine commercial that he did in what has to be the 80s, close to the end of his life.
It's not even French. It's I think it's California. It's like a kind of a crappy wine too, if I remember it. But anyway, point of fact is they're hilarious, right?
They're great. They're great. Any outtake with Orson Welles trying to do lines is fantastic because, of course, he was a phenomenal actor. And
Paul Masson wine still getting the hits after all these years. But yeah, it was a California one, and I specifically know that because I live in Wisconsin, but I'm from California.
Oh yeah,
and I remember that being like I didn't freaking know. I mean, I actually used to spin donuts on my bike on the Gallo parking lot all the time.
Yeah,
like there's like wineries a lot in the Central Valley because that's where I'm originally from, even though I'm mostly disdainful of it. Where it's like almonds, tomatoes, good amount of mid-grade wine. Like it's very agricultural,
right?
Steinbeck. Think of A Mice and Men.
Yes,
if that's a little further south of where I grew up from.
Yes,
that's like where I came up before moving to Oakland, which is where I lived most of my life.
See, I think the reason why I thought that the wine was French is because the only line I really remember in the commercial that Orson says, and maybe the only line he completes, or the only clause he completes is the French. That's the first line. And I don't know what follows that,
which has nothing to do with the actual wine because it's like a French style wine from California, if I remember correctly.
He was just randomly pontificating about French people before.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you? if you're Orson Welles, I mean, hey,
exactly.
Why not? Do whatever you want. Trying to make on the side of the window over here, which seemed like a very long, convoluted ploy to make it with that one girl, the lead. Anyway, whatever. That's neither here nor there. Watch that movie instead of watching this.
Well, and there's a lot of connections there between what Orson Welles and the idea of getting with your female lead, and that brings us to The Last Picture Show by Peter Bogdanovich. And
that
as you say,
professional segue, my dude.
Yeah, I went to school for that. Now they
segue school. I know it well.
Yeah, exactly. So
the classrooms ain't nothing much, but getting from point A to point B is fantastic.
It was actually walking from one class to another where you learn the most amount of information.
Exactly. It's unique amongst its field.
Exactly. So so as Conan pointed out, Peter Bogdanovich, he died last week. It's hard to know anymore because I think about 10 more famous people have died since that time.
It's true.
But it's been a
Sidney Poitier. We had Betty White. We had frickin' Bob Saget.
Bob Saget yesterday. Yeah. Robert Durst. No, that's not as a good one, but
I swear to God, I thought he was still alive. I thought he was already dead. I was like, oh yeah,
that's true.
He was around. Okay,
he was still, in a way, he was still going. But Peter Bogdanovich.
There's a Ghislaine Maxwell joke in there too, but I'm far too dignified to mention it. But
really, though,
I was gonna say that's next week's death. Anyway, moving on. I'm
gonna let that linger for just a second. Hold on.
Think about that. Okay.
The French.
Yeah.
So, yes, and so Peter Bogdanovich, and he made probably he directed probably three of my favorite, amongst my favorite movies. One of them is Targets. I don't know if you've seen Targets.
I feel like I really should know Targets. I feel
Target.
I don't.
It's his lesson known. It's kind of a hidden gem. It's his first major movie. He makes it with Roger Corman.
Right.
Corman
gave a lot of really talented directors their start.
He did, yeah. And kind of basically brought Nicholson up and all that stuff. And so Corman, I think for targets, Corman tells Bogdanovich, I'll give you something like $125,000 to make your own movie, but you have to use 20 minutes of footage from a movie that I shot 5 years ago. And you have to work with Boris Karloff, who's in the original movie and who still owes me a couple of days' work. So Bogdanovich, of course, says, okay. Yeah. I'll go do that. And but Targets, so the Targets is a fantastic movie, and but I won't go into too much detail about it. But that and Paper Moon
is great,
are really good. Another one of his really big movies is What's Up, Doc? Although that never quite hit me in the same way as the other ones did.
What's Up, Doc is good. Yeah, you know, it's solid. It's not like, and then and I think, I don't know how well Mask has aged, but that was a pretty.
I never saw Mask with Cher.
With Cher, yes. It is, and Eric Stoltz. Eric Stoltz's early movies. It's okay. I mean, like, it's not bad. It's just like I don't know how well it's aged. Is the best way I can put it.
Right. It is, I guess, one of his few sort of bigger films, sort of post 70s, I would say, or maybe even post 1975.
Credit where credit's due. He did that incredible, like, 4-hour Tom Petty documentary.
Oh, did he really? I don't think I knew about that.
It's astounding. It's by the way, it's 4 hours of Tom Petty, but like he like starts off from when they're like a garage band in like Gainesville, Florida, and like it's really good. Like if you're remotely into music documentaries and or Tom Petty, it's super worth watching. Like I was like, wow, this is awesome and audacious at the same time. And I was like, oh shit, Peter Bogdanovich did this. Like it didn't even occur to me. Like in the same way that the Sparks documentary by Edgar Wright is fantastic and also they're very entertaining. They're different kind of movies, but
hey,
he did that somewhat recently. That was probably one of the most recent movies he did. Actually, now that I think about it,
it must have been. I didn't know that he did it. It sounds great though. I would definitely check that out.
I mean, if he got 4 hours to kill and want to know about Tom Petty.
It sounds like a recipe for greatness to me. But okay, so speaking of Sparks, did you ever see have you seen Annette?
Oh, I fucking loved Annette. Yeah, Annette was, I mean, so let's set the stage here, right? Like what's in my background, and I don't know if you do an audio only version, so I'm going to describe this. But
yes, describe it.
I've got a 8x10 glossy of Jack Nance and Eraserhead.
Yeah.
Okay. And what I have over here, and this might be a little harder to tell, but this is a square postcard from the Amargosa Opera House and Hotel in Death Valley Junction. This is most known for the end of Lost Highway. It's the hotel, the Lost Highway Hotel, and it's got an incredible story in and of itself. Marta Beckett, this ballerina who was like a big deal in New York, was like moving to LA, broke down in Death Valley Junction, and while the car was getting repaired, the trailer was getting repaired for the car, she saw this borax company hotel for all the people that were like the borax miners, that had been like disused for at that point, like 40 years, something along those lines. But it had this really like beautiful little like opera house, like tiny little like one room opera house, and she basically decided, I'm gonna buy this, I'm gonna live here and put on shows in freaking Death Valley Junction in like the middle of nowhere. And because I've got a bit of a name for myself, I know people will come out to see this because she's like, this big deal ballerina. So she basically just created this whole world around herself and made this incredible oasis of creativity in the middle of the freaking desert.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's a long way around of saying that I love any kind of big artistic venture that has like some degree of like nebulousness or weirdness to it.
Yeah.
I think Lynchian is completely overused, but by the same token, like I gotta say, like I think it fits Annette in a lot of ways, and in ways that are real subtle, but like that there's a real emotional heart to it. Not to mention the soundtrack is great, and I love that it's full on, makes no apologies for like what it is, or even like necessarily lets you know what it is. Like there's a few times that you're like, what is this? What is fucking happening right now? But I like those are some of my favorite types of movies, and I thought Annette was fantastic, and I thought it was like a week, it was a big deal, and then like nobody talks about it anymore, and they're like, okay, so we saw Tick Tick Boom last night, which is sort of like, okay, like I enjoyed it, but it was just it just oozes Lin-Manuel Miranda,
Right.
and like in all of that with that, it's sort of like, I'm sure if I was more of like a theater kid or something, maybe I'd be super into it, but I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like as much,
Yeah.
and like I think all musicals are like that now. Like it's
Yes.
sort of like the Hamilton-ish Hamilton of has become like so influential that everyone just makes their musicals like that now, and I
Yeah.
hate it. And I actually didn't. You know, like whatever. Maybe I'm being a bad progressive. I didn't hate Hamilton. I just thought it was. I was like, hey, this is kind of cheese dick, but whatever. It's pretty good.
I have to say I never saw it, so I cannot comment on it. But you know what? A lot of people I know saw it and liked
Yeah.
it. But
Lindsay saw it and evangelized to me. She's like, you know, I think you might like it. I'm like, all right, fucking
Right.
show it to me. I'll fucking
Right.
watch the goddamn thing. And so, so I watched it. And I was like, oh, it's pretty good. You know, like,
Yeah.
and it's and I get why it sucks that like a lot of terrible people really love it, and so therefore like we must hate it. It's like no, it's pretty good. But
Right.
the Lin-Manuel Mirandization of all musicals is somewhat annoying. That said, Tick Tick Boom was good. I didn't know Andrew Garfield was even remotely musical, but I mean, he kicked ass at it. But when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, there was that West Side Story, that In the Heights thing, which died on the vine, thankfully, because that looked fucking terrible. The James Corden dry
Yes.
humping in the air in front of the we got one good viral moment out of that movie. I'm sure it's bad. I'm sure it's not for me. That's the better way.
Yeah.
But I think that the best musical of the year is so clearly Annette.
Right.
But it's
Yeah,
too
definitely.
crazy. It's too nuts. It's too
Well,
like artsy.
And it also came out at a really weird time, I guess. Like I think
Yeah.
that if it was coming out around, you know, if it came out a month ago, maybe there'd be more sort of talk about it. I don't know, but it came out at a time when movies come out to die, basically.
Right. Well, and so the guy, the director did the French guy.
Yeah.
He did like Holy Motors and Boy
Yeah.
Meets Girl and all that. Like he's like it's just a bunch of interesting things. And Adam Driver, who like first time I saw him was an episode of Girls, which show I was like one point I was like, why am I watching this? I don't even care about it. But I liked him in it, and then like I've seen him be like really good and stuff, and I've seen him be like, all right, you're doing.
I think he can be great. Yeah, he's great in well, he's great in Marriage Story, I think, and he's great in other things. I can't think of them right now.
I mean, like he you know what? I thought he was fantastic in Annette. I thought
Yes.
that was a really good, really weird, daring movie. And you know what? I'm stoked Sparks finally got to make like a cool, weird movie.
Right.
You know, and like and it's awesome. Like it's and the soundtrack is fantastic. It's
yeah.
It's cool, but it's, you know, it's definitely someone that likes weird shit. It was a weird movie.
Yeah, sure. and like a David Lynch movie, it does kind of it leaves you with an uneasy feeling, and that was my big takeaway from it. Like I remember watching it at the end of it, thinking, "Oh, I kind of feel weird after watching that movie." But you know,
I mean, absolutely, it makes you feel something though, right?
Yes.
So that's you know, as opposed to like a couple movies I saw where I'm like,
yeah,
all right.
That was another experience. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely saw that. That is a movie that I saw.
So now, speaking of great movies,
I was gonna say, wait, this has nothing to do with Last Picture Show or Peter.
Well, that's okay. I like to move around a little bit, but the Last Picture. So, what's your experience with this movie? Do you remember when you saw it for the first time?
So the first time I saw. So first of all, I knew about it for years. I was like, wow, I was like, I wonder what that is like. Like that's such an evocative title. Like, what could that be? That could be like. That could mean like a lot of things. And for whatever reason, it just took me forever to watch it. And then when I did, I mean, the first thing I noticed was Sybil Shepherd, frankly. I was like, oh my God. like, holy crap. That's like one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. And when you grow up, as I did, like as a teenager, you see the show Sybil, you don't quite.
Yeah. You're like
Sybil Shepherd in that way. Yeah.
Is that the same woman? Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's very different.
But in the same way that like, you know, like Robin Wright. So we're talking about Princess Bride this week. I'm moving to Extravaganza. Robin Wright's another example. I think she was like 21 when she was in that movie, and just impossibly beautiful, right? And just fantastic. Was it Jeff Bridges and Timothy Bottoms? Like it's just a good slice of keep those expectations diminished Americana. And like, you know, I was just kind of getting into like art house cinema really at the time. Like I was sort of like just sort of exploring that path and kind of really sort of digging deep and be like, oh, these books I have on film, I've got these ones that I should be watching. Okay, Last Picture Show. That sounds like whatever that is. I bet that's going to be good. And then I saw it and I was just blown away by it. I'm like, wow, this establishes such an incredible mood.
Yeah.
Like it's just, and I come from a town like it's not as desolate as that, but I come from like a nowheresville, America sort of town myself. So
right,
it hit home for me in maybe a couple ways that it wouldn't have for others, and I thought it was really rad. Like it blew me away. The starkness, like the black and white, like just like and when he just does these wide shots, and you just see like, oh yeah, there ain't shit around, man. there ain't shit to do, and there ain't shit around. Like I mean, it's astounding. I've seen that emulated many times, and it was probably one of the first times that I thought about direction other than in terms of like a real flashy director like Quentin Tarantino, flash cuts, like whatever. Like I was like, oh no, this dude is like super patient. He's patient with what he does. Like, and that's like his style, and it's so perfect for that film because it's it's basically just these young people like pondering their future. There's a great Letterboxd review that was No Country for Young Men. I was like, that's great.
Yeah, it is. It's about regular people, right? So you don't necessarily want to have a really flashy, over the top style to capture it.
It wouldn't work, or it wouldn't hit the same way. Let's put it that way.
No, and as you point out, there is still a style at work. Like he is creating this sense of mood with his style, with the way he uses the camera, and it's like some of the references that you've made, like all the wide shots, Americana, No Country for Old Men reference.
To be fair, that was some dude on Letterboxd, but
it's accurate, and I think the fact that we can see it, there is a kind of, it's almost like a Western movie, but it's not a Western movie, and like you could picture one of those shots where he's showing that town in Texas. And you could imagine the tumbleweed going by. I don't think he ever does it. Yeah. I think he stopped short of a cliche like that. But
tumbleweed's implied.
Exactly. You could see the tumbleweed in your mind, which I think is a lyric from a '60s song. But there's but you do see that sort of empty, wide shot kind of thing that you would see in old Westerns. Which there is a Western that he shows in the movie. That's the last movie that's played at the movie theater.
It is the actual titular Last Picture Show.
Yeah, that's right. Red River by Howard Hawks. And so there it is kind of, it's like a Western without the cow, like without all the Western accoutrements to some degree.
Yeah, without the trappings. And so like it has what I call, I years and years ago, before I was any goddamn good at writing songs, but was in a band and did it anyway, I wrote a song called Western Character, and that was one of the movies I thought of when I came up with that title, because it's got a Western character.
Yes. Yeah. And that's okay. So doesn't have Western characters. It has a character to it.
A character to it that's very okay. So Lucky. Have you seen Lucky? It's the last movie that Harry Dean Stanton did.
No, I never saw it.
I mean, it's awesome, but it's basically Harry Dean Stanton being this Harry Dean Stanton style character that like never established deep connections to anyone, and just like lives in this like small southwestern town, and like goes about like his life, and you kind of get to see it in all its glory and all its glory. And it's just, that's another one that just like big Western character energy, like in the fact that the whole character of, if you ever spend any time in the American Southwest, there is like like the dust is both explicit and implied. And there's a certain type of person that gravitates towards those locales. And I found it impressive for a number of reasons, not the least of which is it's Harry Stanton's last movie. And it's like very clear that everybody, including him, is very aware of that as well. But it's another example of that I think that it's easy. I think a lot of movies try to emulate that, but a lot of people kind of miss the resting loneliness of it.
Yeah. So I that's one of the things that I see at work in this movie too, is there is a lot of loneliness.
Mhm.
There is a lack of connection between people. Um, I think maybe the one example where you could see people who are connected, maybe two, well, maybe three, maybe everybody's
The
connected now.
3 examples that you can see. It's
Yeah,
actually all
let's
connected.
just say
Where
the
it's
opposite of
JFK
what I
suddenly.
originally said.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I see a connection between the Timothy Bottoms character and
Yeah.
Cloris Leachman, and I see it.
Cloris Leachman, by the way,
Yeah.
as a you know, a younger lady, not if not like young, like not the
Yep.
figure that we think of when we think of Cloris Leachman in a killer
That's right.
role.
Yes, she won the Oscar for the movie,
Yeah.
for
Oh,
the-
did she? Oh, good. That's good. Oh, good. Like
and she's
this.
great. She is phenomenal in it.
Oh,
And
it's good that this movie that came out like 8 years before I was born won an Oscar. Ah, great. This is awesome. I'm glad
She
they
did it.
consulted with me. Before I was born.
she finally did it in 1971.
Go Cloris.
And I guess the between the two sort of male characters, Sonny and Dwayne, there's sort of a connection.
Yeah. I mean, like of a sort, right? In a way that, in a way that I think is more depicted more often now, that
Yes.
maybe than back then.
Yes. And the only other connection that I could see is also again between Sonny, the main character, and Billy,
Yeah.
the boy who doesn't speak, and who, by the way, is Timothy Bottoms' brother played that role.
Sam, right?
Yeah,
Sam Bottoms.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Bottom,
Not
aka the
Bottoms.
Bottoms Boys.
That's the Soggy Bottoms boys were in the
Bottoms Boys.
And
Sam Bottoms he's like a bunch of stuff. Like I mean, he's in the Outlaw Josie Wales. He's in like Apocalypse Now. Like he's in a bunch of other shit.
yes, he did all right.
Yeah. But Sam Bottoms, he did okay. Here to tell you.
Those Bottoms boys, they really knew how to act. Let me tell you.
Pretty good at that acting. Ellen Burstyn, by the way, also.
Oh yeah, Ellen Burstyn.
Who
You can't have a
Ellen,
'70s movie without Ellen Burstyn. in it.
It's the law, and
Yeah.
for a good reason. Yeah.
Yeah, no, she's fantastic. One of the great characters in the movie, and I think actually we can talk about a connection that does exist, but we don't see it on film. Actually, it's only talked about, which is the relationship between Ellen Burstyn's character, Lois Farrow, who's Sybil Shepherd's mother, and Sam the Lion. And so you learn that they had this, tempestuous romantic relationship in the past. Lively, it's the only thing that you really hear in the movie that has life in it. This kind of exciting relationship.
Yeah, that sounds exciting in a town that has literally no excitement. Like,
yes,
I mean that was basically their banner. Should be there's no excitement in this town.
That's right. That's right. And also very little but the people who are escaping, you don't really feel good for those characters either. Like Sybil Shepherd, who escapes.
Yeah,
I don't see she's gonna have I don't think she's gonna have a fantastic life. She seems desperately unhappy and destined to be that way, maybe. And Jeff Bridges is going off to fight in Korea.
Yeah,
so,
that went well.
Yeah. So,
well, I mean, it's a feel bad movie for the ages, right? Like it's you don't say like, I want some belly laughs. Let's throw on The Last Picture Show.
That's true. Although, do you think I think that there might be there's a lot of funny parts in it, or at least funny.
There's definitely some darkly comedic parts. Like, for sure, if you're willing to have a sense of humor about other people's misery, and interactions that are probably, in the moment, not at all funny for them,
yes.
but are hilarious if you're watching the film. Yeah.
Well, along absolutely. Those lines, like the run at the beginning of the movie where they keep telling them, have you ever tackled? Did you ever learn how to tackle?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
They're a perpetually losing football team. Like, they're in high school.
Yeah.
Timothy Bottoms' character Sonny and Jeff Bridges' character Dwayne play for the football team. They're always losing dramatically, it seems. And so the first like 5 minutes of the movie are them going through town, and everybody in town is telling them, "Have you ever heard of tackling?"
Yeah, well, exactly, because it's a small town, right? And it
Yes.
has small town vibes, and part of the small town vibes is to be heavily invested in like the local sports team, and to feel that you are ostensibly on said sports team, even if you have never played a day of sports in your life.
Right.
And I think it does a low-key job of like, yeah, okay, yeah, right. But like everybody wants to get there because they figure no one has mentioned it, right? You know, it's
That's
like
right.
thought would never occur to them. Like, oh, clearly I'm the one that knows, so I'm gonna bring
Yes. And just the like, I'm gonna make the clever remark, like,
yeah,
watch
I'm the guy.
Yeah.
Check this out. Check out. I'm gonna say to him, it's gonna be great. Like, yeah, okay.
And you're right.
Say
It
the
doesn't
word.
even really seem to bother them that much. Like they're
Well,
playing.
they're probably just
football.
used to it, right?
Yeah, that's
Like
right.
what's the line? Everything gets old if you do it often enough.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
I mean
that's
that
right.
it was like a it's not the usage for it, but it's the same thing where it's
Yeah.
just like maybe the first couple times it was like, oh, okay, they're talking about football, engaging a lot. It's like, oh no, they just want to have their say.
Yes.
They want to feel like they've had their say. And like that's part of like the miserific existence that is like being in this like small ass little town that just there's nothing happens in. Like that is the entertainment, one way or the other. Even if the entertainment is like kind of like low-key good-naturedly beating up on your local sports team.
Yeah. Now if there is like, you know, because I'd like to try and encourage people to watch it. So you know, it's
oh yeah, I'm just talking about how like what a miserific experience it is and what a bummer everything. No, it's beautiful. I mean,
it is beautiful. And if there is some, like, this is going to be both a sad and maybe uplifting point. Like I wonder if, because something that comes up a lot in the movie to me is like people talking about just decisions that they made when they were younger because they thought that they were the right decisions to make at the time, and it didn't pan out, obviously.
Didn't
So
work out the way they thought it was going to necessarily.
yeah, like the most significant character, obviously Sam the Lion, when he's talking about you know, his relationship with Lois Farrow. And you know, what does Lois Farrow is married. The character is married when she has this relationship with Sam the Lion, and she's married to a character who you don't see much of in the movie, but plays a big role, who's like the oil man in town. And oil plays this crazy role in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people work, you know,
it's the industry.
Yeah, it's the main industry in town. And Sybil Shepherd, who's JC, is the daughter of those two. And anybody who's dating JC works for her father, obviously, because Dwayne worked for him at the beginning. Sonny later works for him. And then the guy she sleeps with midway through the movie as well also works for him. So there is that. But I do think that there is this kind of like, and sorry, I'll give one more example. And then and Cloris Leachman is married to the high school gym teacher,
right?
Who
dream.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that was like the great thing for her to do, right? And Sonny asks her, because Sonny's having an affair with her. He's like, "Why did you marry him?" And she's like, "He seemed like that. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time."
Right.
And it just seems like everybody's making these decisions when they're young, where it's like, oh, okay, you know, this is what I need to do. This is what I should do. And, but then they kind of look, and I just wonder if this movie is suggesting any kind of escape from that. Like, is it possible to make?
Well, the possibility, certainly the possibility of escape is like, you know, if not outright characterized as such, is alluded to and promised, almost like, you know, with the aspirational dreams. But like, because the idea is sort of like, well, this is nothing and nowhere, and if you stay here, you will be nothing and go nowhere. Right? And that's sort of like just known. Even people that like maybe try to be funny about it or try to have a good, like, you know, good-hearted feeling, it's like they know. It's like this town, that town's dying. That town's dying and like won't be around in like a generation, and like nobody really talks about it. Nobody really explicitly states it all that much, but it's certainly like as ubiquitous as like the quiet desperation in the dust.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, as you say, like when Ellen burst in, you know, she comes in at one point to her daughter's room, and JC is Sybil Shepherd's character. JC is, you know, she's dating Jeff Bridges' character Dwayne, and the mother Lois is basically saying you should play the field, you know, don't
don't tie yourself down, exactly, because that's, you know, like,
that's what
hey,
I did.
let me tell you a
That's
thing
the
or
thing
two.
she
Yeah,
did.
yeah, and like I want better for you. I think you should, you know, which is kind of crazy, because it's like there's like a tacit admission of you know, not even just settling, but just limiting what could have been, and like knowing that that door is long since closed. Like there's no
Yeah.
future door there, but there's still a future door for her character, for Sybil Shepherd's character.
Yeah. But what is wrong with JC exactly? Because I can't tell if she's like desperate for some kind of attention from her parents, or if she's just desperate for action. Like she wants something to happen.
I think it's more the latter. I mean, I think it's I think she and the thing is, I've met folks like her who are just very ambitious, but aren't really quite able to articulate it in their way.
Right.
But they know what they don't want, and they know what
Right.
they don't want to be, and they sort of like define themselves based on. I mean, honestly, like, I mean, to a certain degree, I guess you could say that about me. I mean, like I said, it's not like Modesto was like some booming metropolis or anything,
Right.
but you know, I think there's a certain couple types of paths in the non-present times for a woman to kind of get out, and it's usually sort of like, what's the big thing? I'm gonna go out and go to Hollywood and you know, make it or whatever. And you know, there's a few other ones, but other than just like random happenstance of like, you know, catching the eye of some billionaire that rolls through town, like, you know, what were the options, right?
Especially right. That's right, because the movie comes out in 1971, but it's set in 1951, right? So it's set in this earlier time. So you're right, the options for women are incredibly limited at the time.
Like, I mean, what, you know, like, needle through a trying to do a go through the eye of a needle. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, but like,
no. I got you. I was following you. I was gonna wait until I was waiting for it. I knew it was coming. But
it's by the same token, like, it's sort of like, it's, you know, it's not told necessarily. There are people that talk about it, but like shown that, like, you know, she if anyone can do it, she probably could.
That's
like,
true.
You know, to a certain degree, right? Like, it's shown that she is a whatever promising young woman, right? That like she is too big for that town.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, what does that mean? Probably nothing, because like, you know, to a certain degree, you can imagine like her mother probably was too, and how did that turn out?
Right.
You know.
Right.
She sees that, and like, by the same, like, neither one wants that path for her. Yeah, which is kind of wild, because it's sort of like, you can tell there's like a certain degree of like resigned sadness about that too, of like, you know, you can't, if you're using yourself as an example of what not to do, you can't really tell yourself that everything turned out great, can you?
Right. That's right.
And that's heavy
advice. Yeah, that's right. But it's such a great, it's maybe one of my favorite moments in the movie is at one point, and by the way, if you haven't seen the movie, I do highly encourage you to see it, because
it's really, really good. And it's I mean, it's not just like, I'm gonna watch this because, like, you know, the dude died. Like, it's like, no, this is legit, like, a great film.
Yeah,
like, I think it's best, personally.
I think it's one of the great American movies ever made, actually. And so you have, at one point, JC marries Sonny, the Timothy Bottom's character.
Yeah.
And they go off to get married, and they're driving back. They're married. They're driving in his convertible. And she's like, boy, I sure hope my parents don't come and find us. And he's like, well, why should your parents come? Because they were eloping, and without,
right.
He's like, oh, I wrote them a note before. And then and he's like, what? Why'd you do that? And then this cop car starts coming in. She's looking at the car like, oh, is it going to stop us?
Yeah.
And then it does. Oh, well, it first doesn't. And she like looks like a despondent, like it's not.
Yeah, it's like, oh. Okay.
But it really does demonstrate in such a real way, like how there's so little to do in this town that this is what she has.
That's entertainment, right?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to get married. Step one, get married.
Exactly.
And to this guy I don't even really like. And write a note to
whatever.
Yeah. And
Something to do.
yeah, it's a Saturday. I got something to do.
It'll be a laugh.
But that really does demonstrate in this stark way just how little there is to do in this town.
Yeah. Well, and that's been played out multiple times over the ages, in some cases, like showing like the more cruelty side. But I feel like it weirdly lands more on the playful side with that.
Yes.
Which is like, it's not like she's trying to like get him killed or
yes.
like whatever, but it's clearly just she wants to. That's a fun game for her.
Well, in that sense, like they are real high school students. You know what I mean? Like it's a very realistic film in that nothing really all that big happens. They make small decisions. They have sort of small consequences, and that's it. And it's phenomenal in that regard because it is just this kind of really very nicely done small film.
But I think it also shows that some of those small decisions and small consequences have the ripple effect that lead towards larger life definitional decisions. And especially, I'm going to say this. I think about this movie way different now than when I saw it at like 19 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, like, I was like, oh, did not think about that. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Yep. Especially when it's like, oh, when you have your whole life ahead of you, you look at things a certain way. When you've like lived a lot of life and you see films where people are pondering that hits you differently. And instead of being, I academically understand what this character is going through, to like, oh yeah, I remember when. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
yeah, exactly. But the movie really is. Yep. It is. It's like you expected things to go a certain way, and it didn't really go a certain way. But also, Bogdanovich makes the really fascinating choice of really just focusing on the young people, and you get these.
It's their story.
Yeah. And you get these glimpses of this is what the future could be. Sam the lion, the Cloris Leachman character, the Lois Farrow character. And also, I think another remarkable thing that Bogdanovich does is to really emphasize the lack of connections between people. Like there's a lot of scenes of sexuality in the movie, but they're all incredibly awkward. There's not a
exactly
one of them that's like titillating. They're all awkward.
So I'm glad you said that, because like this to a certain degree is a relentlessly horny movie, but like but in the way that actual teenagers are, rather than the stylized version of like everyone always knowing the right thing to say and knowing the right thing to wear and this and that. There's just a lot of like kind of pregnant silences. There's like a lot of pining gif kind of like moments, like and like there's something kind of sweet and heartbreaking about that at the same time. But you wouldn't want it to change, right? Like you enjoy the fact that like these kids are like at this inflection point of like, this is when one way or the other they're going to start losing this innocence, and it's going to the clear indicator is it's going to go this way of like they're going to become a townie, like their parents or the other people, maybe, and then like whoever ends up on the football team they can ask them about the about if they know how to tackle, right? Well, because when I did, Bob, and that's the glory days mentality. Use a Springsteenism. Which isn't to say that people can't be happy doing that, right? But like to see like the moment of like, wow, one way or the other, stuff's about to change. For all of these kids, and tacitly, I think Bogdanovich does a pretty good job of being like, look, there's not much reason for any of them to stay, so you're kind of rooting for them to get out without knowing how they would do that. And I think that's so perfectly. Think about like, well, I don't remember the exact year supposed to take place, but think about like On the Road, right? When On the Road came out. And what a revolutionary book it is. And I don't want to talk about the Cult of Kerouac, like whatever, this and that, but like of just like, the dude who went on the road and wrote a book about it, because that's a thing you could do. And the idea being like, what you could, in American culture, that didn't exist before. And say what you will about like, dudes, and it's always dudes discovering Kerouac for the first time, becoming total douchebags. Okay, fine. But like the idea of like the allure of the open road and the possibility that entails, like this is set before that. I think Bogdanovich did a great job. It's interesting because Paper Moon's set in the Depression. So like I think his two best movies are not contemporary to like where he was making movies, but I think he wanted to tell a little bit of history towards like, hey, you know, that stuff that we think about that we all like, you know, there were times that those doors are open to us now, but they were not open to us not that long ago. And to show the limitations is a really interesting way to do it because it's so patient.
Yeah.
And showing that just absolutely just patient.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can choose to interpret that a couple ways. Like I know people that are like strict, if not hateful of people being around, just introverts that love like living in an isolated environment. They're like, heaven, awesome. And I know some people that are like, that looks like hell. And I know a lot of people that are in between, but I think it does a pretty good job of showing that like, look, if you like this kind of lifestyle, this town is dying.
Yeah.
Like this town is not going to be around for that much longer.
Yeah. And
without being like, hey, it's crazy how the town isn't going to be around much longer, right? Like he shows it on the screen.
Yeah. And I think the other aspect of that is anything that could potentially hold those people together. And I'll give two things that could hold them together. One is just basic interpersonal relationships could hold that town together, but those are very few and far between. Sonny and his father, there's one scene between them that's so incredibly awkward. It's at that dance.
Oh yeah.
And the father comes over and is like, hey son. It's an incredibly awkward scene. Hey,
it's just goobers, you know?
Yeah.
Like, all right.
And then they just walk away from each other, and that's it. That's the only time you see them at all together in the movie. That's the only time you see the father, I think. And you know, in those scenes of sort of those scenes of sexuality, like the other scene, you're absolutely right that you get the kind of classic teenagers fumbling through sort of sexual activity. But then there's also like the first time Cloris Leachman's character and Sonny have sex, and Bogdanovich, it's again another funny moment where like he focuses on Cloris Leachman taking her shirt off and it gets stuck on her head, and it's just we're sitting there watching this
watching it all unfold,
and he's like slowly, they're in separate corners taking their clothes off, and you know, they get caught on things. And that's how sexuality works.
It's not cool looking at all. Like
no, it really is not. It really is not. And in fact, my partner walked in as I was watching part of the movie, and ever since then, the other night, and ever since then, she's referred to it as your pervy movie. But I keep trying to say, no, it's not. It's.
Well, I mean, it's crazy how it rides that line though. That like it shows, you know, this sort of low-key simmering desire of the young that's like tied up with wanting to go and be somewhere else and do, like, it's all like intertwined together as like one big thing. Like that's probably like if there was like an internal dialogue, which would make this movie terrible, by the way, which the characters, it would be like one like run sentence of all these things put together, right? Because that's how it is when you're that age.
Yes. And so there is a lot of sexuality in the movie, a lot of scenes involving sex, but
it's never made to look that cool though. It's also just which I love, because it would have been you know, like it would have been a very different kind of movie if it was. Like, and it would have subverted the point.
Well, and even the famous scene of Sybil Shepherd on the diving board is again the same thing. Like it's the same thing as the Cloris Leachman Sam Bottom scene, except just with her, and she's just slowly taking up, and then he keeps cutting to like just the people in the pool watching her. Yeah, and then the boy, the little brother who's there, who's watching as well.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing at all about
it. Not a whole lot of entertainment options. It's pre-cable, mind you.
That's right. So you know, there's that. So there's no real good interpersonal connections, but also like Sam the Lion, he calls the soul of the city at one point. Sam the Lion owns the pool house, he owns the movie theater, he owns all these things, and then he dies halfway through the movie. And so then the so-called soul of the city is now gone. And just these things that were bringing people together, like the movie theater. People are now, it's early 1950s. People are starting to watch television in their own homes, as we see in the movie as well. So you get whatever there was that could have possibly saved this dying city, as you say. Those things are slowly slipping away as well.
And it's not going to come back. Like there's no way that's going to come back. Certainly not in a way that would have any impact to the community and bring people together. Like and that's very much an American story of that time period, right? Like, I mean, that's something that has been played for comedy, and it's something that's been played for drama, in the way that for better or for worse, and in the same way that now, like the impact of like broadcast television, like when I think of a network or something where it's like you had 66 million people watching the same show at the same time before cable television, and then turn that to like the balkanization of the internet, where everyone has their own little private internet that they get to like get their entertainment or infotainment or information from. That it's just another example of it's the American adolescence, really. That's what the 60s were, which, even though this is a movie about the 50s, is really about the 60s.
Yeah.
And I think he does it. It's amazing that he manages to pull it off in that way, because it's not even as much as I love Easy Rider. That's very much like, oh yeah, it's a 60s movie. We get it.
Yeah.
It's very much, we get it. The Summer of Love. We understand.
Right. But Easy Rider is a great movie as well, but
it's fantastic, but it's more overt about like it's, well, spoiler alert for a movie that's much older than I am. Again, does not end well.
No,
for the rebels, right? For the good guys who eventually probably became yuppies. I mean,
if you want to watch a movie where the main characters die at the end, just any movie from 1968 to 1974, you can basically
Bonnie and Clyde. That's another. I mean, like it was. But think about it, and so this is a parallel conversation, right? Because think about it in terms of what was happening culturally, right? Anyone that made any change or really like pushed anything forward, like they got.
Yeah.
And like that was just like, that's just the way it is, like as far as that goes. I mean, JFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, like all these, if you were like a change maker, and even like, extending into the 70s, even like, St. John Lennon, off by a maniac, right? And that's that weighed heavy upon that generation. But I think one thing the Last Picture shows is the death of the 50s. It shows the death of the 50s without anyone realizing that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people, I mean, I do get the sense that Bogdanovich himself was a very nostalgic guy. If you ever I never talked to him. If you ever,
we talk all the time. We got a Zoom call coming up next week. I think he might be late.
If you've seen an interview with him, he's very obsessed with old movies, and Howard Hawks looms very large. Over Bogdanovich. Like I said, the last picture at the Last Picture show is a Howard Hawks movie, Red River. What's Up, Doc is a Howard Hawks tribute to the screwball comedy. There's a line in Targets about Howard Hawks was the greatest storyteller. So there's obviously Orson Welles is a huge influence on Bogdanovich. In fact, Orson lived on Peter Bogdanovich's couch
he sure did,
for a while. So, the mighty have fallen, but but so Peter Bogdanovich had this great reverence for sort of classical Hollywood. But a lot of people say about Last Picture Show that it's a movie that is both very much of its time, but also at the same time very much of another time, and that is in some ways what's so interesting about this movie. That it's a 1950s movie, but it's also very much a 1971 movie. This movie couldn't have ever been made in the 1950s, but there is this reverence for that time period, and it's in black and white and all of that stuff as well.
I mean, I back that. I mean, like I said, like again, culturally, it's the much like it still managed to overshadow all culture, like the 1960s and especially the late 1960s. Like it's just like it's the cultural defining moment of like the next like 50 years, right? Because of everyone just won't shut the fuck up about it. But by the same token, like we cannot overstate the influence of like the Beats and the idea that it was being floated for the first time after people got over like, you know, the post-war baby boom. Because remember, that's where the baby boom came from, right? Everyone came back from war. They bought a house, you know, started a family. That led to the baby boomers, right? Then what do you do after that? Well, maybe you start like being like, hey, is there something else out there? Is there something else out there for me to find? And that's one of the things why like a lot of people like Hoover thought that like the Beats were so subversive. It was like, oh, they're selling a degenerate lifestyle, which is basically to say not the nuclear family, which is now, even though at that time it's like been around for like not even 10 years, but the only acceptable norm.
Yeah.
This is the only way that you could possibly be is a heteronormative, you know, nuclear family. Which you gotta admire by the way, you have to admire the Stones of framing that when it still was like that new culturally, like, no, this is the only way that you can be, and to have it still have people like kind of flying that flag.
That's true.
Like,
I never really thought about that before. That, you know, it's amazing how quickly it went from this invented thing to the norm. That's not usually how it happens, right? It's usually takes a while for it to solidify.
So I mean, and that has a lot to do with you know the type of America that America was at the time. But then you bring in like ostensibly, you know, the Beats. You have like you know. You have Ginsberg and Burroughs, you know, Kerouac, like all these Bukowski for the dirtbags,
right?
and all kind of being like, hey, you know, maybe this is not all it's cracked up to be, and maybe there's like a whole lot more interesting stuff that's out there. And so people start like getting like, you know, the idea in their minds, and that's really the first time people have the freedom to do that. Because think about like pre-World War II, right? It's like, okay, you got the Depression. You're lucky if you have a job. If you do have a job, you're gonna bust your ass all day long to make sure that you can keep it so you can support your entire extended family. You know, like I'm thinking of like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, where they got like, you know, both sets of grandparents in the beds, and like, you know, it was like the whole freaking extended family's all like lounging.
Yes, that was the most you could hope for at that
right,
time.
Exactly. But it's like, hey, but we all. Yeah, exactly. And it's which is hilariously depicted in that way, by the way. But like, I think that it's this is the first time that people started thinking about what rebellion could look like.
Yeah.
That later became very much like, oh, it looks like this in the 60s, right? Like, oh, here's the culture identifiers. You grow your hair long, you listen to rock music, you take drugs, et cetera, et cetera. And then it became like, you know, a set of rules or whatever. And that's a whole separate discussion. But this is
true. Like that generation, sorry for interrupting, but that generation too, like John Lennon has that quote. I just came across it a couple of weeks ago where John Lennon said, all of our parents, you know, our parents always talked to us about the war. We couldn't do this because of the war. We couldn't do that because of the war. And Lennon said, he's like, I'm sorry about that, but that's not our life.
Well, exactly. And that was the beginning of that mindset of like, hey, that does suck, but that doesn't have anything to do with me. And that is, and remember, Last Picture Show 71, that stuff was like 3 years ago. Think about like, okay, you know what's happening 3 years ago? That was 2019.
Yeah.
So think about like that, right? Which like that literally like 2019 is like, oh wow, oh yeah. Well, we were on tour, so that was different. But like other than that, it's like I feel exactly the same, like whatever. Like that is not like a recent memory. That's like just happened.
Yes, I don't know. It has been an insane 3 years.
It has, but time itself seems to work.
That's true.
Pandemic time, but like the point of fact is that like he tells a story about the 1950s, but he's trying to tell a story about the endemic nature of what he likes and what he found freeing about the 1960s. Think about what's happening at that time, right? There's like beginning of French New Wave. I mean, as a filmmaker, oh my God, what a great time, right?
Yeah.
It's only going to get better because that's before Coppola really starts working. That's before Scorsese really digs in his heels. Like, I mean, but at the time to be like, oh my God, look at all of these possibilities of these stories that we can tell. To tell a story like that's ostensibly set in the 50s, but it's really about what he considered, at the time, modern times. Makes it somehow timeless, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Because that's a hard beam to walk.
And I think it is along those lines hard to not talk about this film without talking about that sort of new Hollywood movement, which emerges, is very much influenced by the European art house cinema, especially the French New Wave. So movies like Breathless and Jules and Jim, 400 Blows, movies like that. 400 Blows, again, a Truffaut film about a kid. Again, I think you can sort of see that lineage from a movie like that to a movie like The Last Picture Show.
Like no real, not tons of hope in that movie, no. Sort of just like, oh, poor kid, fuck.
Yeah. This again is one of my all-time, like that would be in the top fantastic. 5 favorite movies, the 400 Blows. Really remarkable.
Forget about it. It's amazing.
Yeah. But you can see the kind of connect, and so all these kind of American filmmakers see those movies and then get inspired to basically start their own kind of cinema beyond the confines of the studio system. And Bogdanovich, I think, in some ways becomes at first a major figure in that movement. And it's funny when you mentioned Tarantino before. You're right. There's no flashiness. There's not the same kind of flashiness, but I heard somebody say that Bogdanovich was in many ways like the Tarantino of his time in that.
Absolutely. Yeah. In the way that exactly. He was like, whatever the auteur, right? The auteur theory, and he was cool.
Yeah.
And at one point, Peter Bogdanovich was like, he was like the cool hip guy. Right. And that was at a time where filmmakers started to become stars themselves.
Yeah. So just like today, like if, when they're selling a Tarantino film, when they're promoting it and they do like the talk show circuit, they obviously do the stars in his movies because he has big stars in his movies, but he'll also go out too. So he'll be on different talk shows, and that was what Bogdanovich did back in his day too. Along with a lot of those other new Hollywood filmmakers like Scorsese, but Bogdanovich,
because he'd be like, "Yeah, I'll talk about it, like whatever, sure."
Yeah.
Whereas Truffaut might be like, "Oh, well, I don't know." Okay, we get it, you're artsy. Meanwhile, Agnes Varda's over here being like, "What do you want to know? I'll tell you anything about it." Oh no, you're a woman. You couldn't possibly do it. Meanwhile, Cleo from 5 to 7 was like, yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say Cleo from 5 to 7, played with time in a way that she should be getting royalties from some filmmakers who I will not name. But anyway, point of fact is that the sexism was a real thing around that time period. But if you were a dude, Gold Rush.
Yeah. Well,
if you were a visionary director, I have my vision and it's going to look like this. And, all the better if you can play around with it in a way that fits in with the times, which is to say literally anything having to do with rebellion or just do something unexpected or different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and actually along those lines too. Yeah. Cleo from 5 to 7 is one of the great French New Wave films and often highly disregarded, I think.
I mean, yes.
I think we have to presume that the major reason for it is because it's a lady who directed it, Agnes Varda, who just died recently as well.
I know, and they finally gave her an award right before the end. But it's like, wow, you just almost waiting for the buzzer for that one. But thanks for doing that.
They did.
I mean,
they got it in.
They finally got it in time, but there's no other way to put it, right? As much as a lot of the other quote unquote masters of the French New Wave are kind of taught in film school and are people that are not film nerds talk about them, just hard to sit over here just making the ultimate vibe movie that again plays around with fucking time 10 years before this comes out. Yeah. And you have to think about the fact that because everyone's watching everyone else's stuff too, right?
Yeah.
You see a movie like that and you start thinking about like, wow, that is basically real time between 2 hours.
Yes.
So what else can you do with time? So that
Yeah.
leads to these like these very patient explorations, and not being hurried about things, because like, well, what is time? Like, how can you tell a story that tight and taut and have it be basically happening like in real time? And I mean, not that not that I think it's a direct inspiration for the Last Picture Show, but I think, again, it's important to point out that like he's not hurrying up with the cuts.
No.
He
No.
wants to show that this is a place where fuck all happens. So he
Yeah.
shows a lot of fuck all happening.
Yeah.
But that was a
Exactly.
wild concept. Nobody was, people weren't really doing that. Like, sure, you had like, something like Exterminating Angel or something, where it's like, oh, here's just people in a room and they can't leave the room, which is like ultimately the first version of the Hot Lava game. But I mean, like, that's a different type of like using using the space to like expand the ideas of what the space can be, right? So Bogdanovich takes this shitty small town, again, the implied tumbleweed, come through it. This is dying. It will not be there.
Yeah.
It is not going to be around later on, and it's just going to get worse. And he just, instead of anybody like announcing that, like having like some big like soliloquy about it, like it just shows it.
Yeah.
And that it's not gonna, if these kids stick around, first of all, like, not all of them are probably gonna make it out, but whoever sticks around is probably not gonna have a good go of it. It's probably gonna turn out just like it did for their parents and for the older characters, which is just depressing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But seriously, folks, you should go and see it. It's a fantastic.
But the thing is, it's so here. All right, so let's turn that around, right? I think Last Picture Show is a huge vibe movie, which people seem to be discovering in a way that, like, if you would tell me people were like, fucking around with like Stalker and stuff like that, and like getting into it, I'm like, wow, that's, holy moly, that is not how my generation looked at it, like, at all. Like, you were like, why are you watching this shit? But like,
nothing happens.
Nothing happened. It's awesome though, but people, the kids, so to speak, whatever. I mean, this has it all, right? Because it's like, think about how timeless it is. Again, and this is one of the reasons why if it was sexier, it wouldn't work. Yeah, because it's kids being just aimlessly and relentlessly horny, but like not really have any idea of what to do about it. It's all tied up with a bunch of other stuff. Like, that's always going to be the case.
Yes.
What's the difference? They don't have cell phones in their hands. Okay.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's still going to work.
Yeah.
And it's so smart of him just to like not glamorize it.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that just wasn't done.
No.
Everything had to be Rebel Without a Cause, and I love Rebel Without a Cause, but everybody had to like look cool and be cool, and this is like, no one's really that cool in this.
No, and it's taking a movie like Rebel Without a Cause and just paring away at it until it's at its most kind of like simple, and this is the world as it actually is. And there's really no rebels in this town.
No. That's another thing. What else would ruin this movie?
Yeah.
Well, if there was like, hey, I'm gonna get out and go, blah, 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 I'm a rebel, blah, blah. The Scrappy Dooization of Last Picture Show would be terrible.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Jeff Bridges is veering into that territory, but
he gets right up to the doorway. Right?
Yeah.
But like, then he doesn't really have, he's got nothing to back it up with. So.
And he keeps getting deflated. Like, I think JC, Sybil Shepherd's character, helps to deflate that. Like, another example of the awkward sexuality. The first time they attempt to have sex, he cannot perform. And then the second time you see a few days later, it's them singing the school anthem at the school, and he's just like, I can do it again. Let's try it again.
Because he's not thinking about the anthem.
No, and you can tell he's been constantly thinking about this since that moment in the hotel.
Constant, like run.
I can make it work. I can make it work.
Yeah,
I just need some mango. So then they, sorry, a little Seinfeld reference there. So then they go to the motel, and obviously it happens that time. But as he's leaving, he's like doing this. He's like, and she says, "Stop pressing. I don't think you did it right anyway."
which is great. It's like he's not even allowed to have that, you know.
No.
Which is fine. He doesn't deserve it. Like
No.
again,
No.
because that comes back to the fact that these are real people, and like you know, they're how often do you get to triumph in real life, like unasterised, you know, unfootnoted triumph? Like it's rare.
Right.
And I again, it wouldn't work if he like was the venerated one. It wouldn't work in the same way. In the same way that like I like Fast Times at Ridgemont High a lot. And one of the reasons I like it is that even like Damone, who is set up as like the coolest cool kid, he has all the has all the concert tickets, and like he knows, he's telling his buddy how they get with girls and this, that, and the other. But even then, it's like he fucks up all over the place too, right? And he's not shy about that, and it shows that like it's not that he's evil; it's just that he like fucking just kind of doesn't know what to do, and like it wouldn't be the same if he just got to be Mr. Cool Guy the whole way through. Yeah, would it still be cool? Sure, but it wouldn't hit the same way. And I think that's a really interesting movie that is based off of actual high schoolers.
Right.
Which makes a lot of sense when you think about it.
Yeah, and I think that the same thing applies to Last Picture Show too, because there's nobody you could call a good guy or a bad guy in this movie. And even though Sonny acts, you know, tries to act as best as he can, I think he's still, you know, a big turn in this movie is the fact that he's having this affair with Ruth, with Cloris Leachman, I think her name's Ruth, and then just leaves her without saying anything for JC, for Sybil Shepherd, right? And she's trying to continue making some connection, but he won't even talk to her. And so you know, so he's not squeaky clean in this movie, and it certainly doesn't make any, you know, it doesn't make that a secret that he's not that great either. So there's no perfect characters in this movie, but there's nobody there's
no villains either.
No, there's no villains either.
Again, the worst things that happen in this are largely born out of boredom.
Yeah.
You know? And like that's very true to life too for small town.
That's right. Yeah. So apparently a big thing with this movie, like the thing that really caught people by surprise, was that it was in black and white. And
it was a bold decision because black and white was not considered cool.
No.
Like at all.
But you know what's funny about this? I think as a musician, I think you'll appreciate this metaphor. I was thinking about this today because I was trying to think about why this was, because it hadn't been that long since there were cool movies in black and white. Like certainly in Europe, they're still making black and white movies up until the mid 60s. You know, Personas in black and white.
Absolutely,
Masculine Feminines in black and white. So you have these kind of mid 60s black and white movies. But I think, and tell me what you think of this metaphor. If you go back to like the 60s in music, you had this turn from mono to stereo that happened almost overnight. So for a long time, mono is the king. Like
Beatles put out mono and stereo mixes of their records.
Yes. And apparently like the Beatles would have been much more invested in the mono mixes. So I think they were around for when they did the mono mix of Sgt. Pepper, and then, you know, just left George Martin to kind of do this.
George will sort it. Yeah. That's not important.
That's exactly. And now that's 1967. 2 years later, I think Abbey Road comes out. Yeah. Just to continue and I think it only comes out in stereo. And that's how fast the turn is from like mono is the way we do things to if you do things in mono, you're no longer with the times. And I think that the same was true with the black and white color thing.
Well, sure. I mean, so think of where culturally 71, right? So like what Patton wins Best Picture, but George C. Scott refuses the Oscar because like he, you know, was like wanted to talk about like the hollowness of getting an award for basically saying it's a meat market ostensibly, right? Like, I forgive the speeches, but you know, in that same way, think of things that like so speaking as a musician. I have been making music long enough where it was like the CD was the thing. Like, if you make vinyl, you're like, what are you doing? And then suddenly something changed, and like now you have to make vinyl, and nobody like cares about CDs anymore. And then like, oh, but maybe people care about cassettes. Oh no, they really don't. Actually, what people really want to do is just listen to shit on Spotify.
Right.
Okay. Like, and also there's like the training, the organized training that people have done to like not own music anymore, but to rent it. Like, and people have been trained over the course of and because that's the only way that the music industry has been able to like claw back some degree of autonomy, as they would call it, away from the consumer. And people chose, just like we chose to give up freedom for safety with the Patriot Act, we chose to give up rewarding artists for instant availability with streaming. But all that has happened culturally in a very small amount of time. Like, and it's just going to get crazier. Like the changes are going to be like so much more different. I mean, the fact that you can shoot a feature length motion picture on a phone now, right? Like, you know, whereas like, okay, like I look at videos that I took 12 years ago and I'm like, oh my God, that looks awful. It looks like someone's last known photograph. But it's stuff changes quickly, and we think about it in terms of like, we don't even think about it that it does because it happens so quickly, and we don't even think about how quick it is until we be like, oh wow, remember when this happened? Remember when people were talking about Tiger King? Wow, that was nuts. How many years ago was that?
Apparently they put out another season of it.
I'm sure they did. You couldn't pay me to watch it. I mean, I watched the original one. I was just like,
did it?
I was like this. It went up to annoying me to a point of like, if this gets even a little bit more annoying, I'm out. And like, it stayed right at that point. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to talk about it, but I saw the thing. Fine,
right?
I understand the memes now. Great. I feel really proud of myself.
I just kept hearing how crazy it was, and that was that's the only thing people would say. It's crazy.
Lodge 49, which is a brilliant show, one of the most brilliant shows on television. Unique, interesting, kind of dirtbag pinch-in is probably the most reductive way to put it.
Okay.
Died on the vine because it didn't find its audience in time. Meanwhile, people watching fucking Tiger King, and I'm like, Christ, I fucking hate humanity. But anyway,
good Lord, Tiger King really did a number on you.
Well, it's not, it's Tiger King. It's like the Sharknado. It's like the Snakes on the Plane. Sort of like the, hey everybody, we're liking the thing that's
animal related,
right? Exactly. Noted animal hater, Conan Neutron. But no, it's just there are certain flashpoints, inflection points of popular zeitgeist based content that I think are just willful celebrations of things that are marginal at best, is the best way to put it, and probably terrible.
Right.
And some of it's sort of like, oh, it's fun. Hey, Samuel Jackson's in the Snakes on the Plane movie. I'm tired of all these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane, because we all say the line, Sam. Like we expect that of him. Okay, fine. And then it comes the ultimate culmination that I think isn't Tiger King. It's Sharknado, where I'm like, hey, everybody, we made a piece of shit. Check out the piece of shit we made. Want to see 17 sequels of this piece of shit? No, I really do not. I will not. But that's, you know what? Also, I don't hate watch things. Right. I only watch things I like. And if I think something, like for instance, one of my favorite book series is The Dark Tower. I have never seen the movie that came out. I won't watch it. Not going to do it. No way. Not going to happen. Because I like it too much.
Right.
I like it too much.
And
so
you're not going to like the show.
I'm going to be bummed out at best and pissed off at worst.
Right.
So point of fact, though, is that, but all this guy, come back to the original point of things happening quickly. Like, it went from being, oh no, we really want to do a 2001, right? We want to have like the most vibrant Technicolor like coming at you. And I think Bogdanovich was just like, no, this is like an arid town where nothing happens. Like, it should look as boring and like flat as possible, to the point that I'm going to like exaggerate that and make that like a character in the movie, practically.
Yes.
Which is something that think of Malick, right? Think of Terrence Malick, and like, many people have like done that and like taken that to the nth degree now. And I Badlands is one of my favorite movies of all time as well.
Yeah.
But like Bogdanovich is something here where it's like, this is one of the great black and white movies.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if, like, I mean, the joke used to be, oh no, watch out, Ted Turner's gonna come in with his crayon box, right? Can you imagine like a colorized Last Picture Show?
Oh, it
Fuck
would
out
be
of here!
awful. It would
Get
be
the fuck
awful.
out of here!
Yeah,
Fucking out of
that's
here with
true.
their crayons. I'm not looking for that.
Yeah, no, that it would be awful. And actually, it's interesting. I just looked at the quote where, this is Ellen Burstyn says to Sybil Shepherd at one point, "Everything is flat and empty here. And if you want to find out about monotony real quick, marry Dwayne." And I think that it's true that, like, if this is the world that we're supposed to be in, then Bogdanovich. And I'm somebody who thinks that I love black and white photography. I think it's really beautiful, and it can have lots of there you go. Exactly.
I got one of Dale Cooper and Sheriff Truman over there too, and I got one of
there you go.
Hicks. I got but actually the only photos I think seem to have in this room are all black and white. So anyway, whatever. That's about stuff that's in my room that you can't see.
Right. someday you should do a little turnaround.
Yeah.
On movie night to Extravaganza, do it.
It'll be like movie night Extravaganza at Cribs.
Yeah.
You can finally see what the hell Andy's looking at when he looks to the left.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great.
Spoiler alert, probably his family.
Right. Could very well be. I want to see Forrest go through the door that's open in the back when I feel like I'm just trying to pick, I think that would be good.
That'll be the season 2 ender.
The season 2 ender should be him walking through the door, and then it just cuts off, and then it should be to be continued.
Yeah. Exactly. We'll play Don't Stop Believing. Anyway. Sorry, continue, please.
Well, and then
black and white photography, and white,
but it's not like the kind of Ingmar Bergman black and white shadow oriented. It's a very flat black and white.
Yeah, and I say that, so that's a good point, because I say that as a huge fan of like Seventh Seal. Like, by the way, like I'm glad I saw Seventh Seal when I was younger, because like considering how many times it's been homaged and referenced in like culture, I would think it was going to be a totally different kind of movie.
Yeah,
point of fact, it's pretty darkly funny. Like that's a darkly funny movie.
Yeah,
and people just like only, because it was so striking. Those black and white images were so, there's death, and they're playing chess, that's crazy. And that's, people just focused on that because it's beautiful. It's amazing. But like that in and of itself, the way Bergman did it was extraordinary. And the fact that Bogdanovich chose to make this look as unextraordinary as possible, in fact, makes it extraordinary.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, I think, like you say, like it evokes a mood, and a movie like The Seventh Seal and Persona, they evoke those two movies evoke two very different kinds of moods from each other. I don't
sure, they're not.
But and as somebody who's a David Lynch fan, like I certainly see a lot of Persona in David Lynch, a lot of David Lynch's work, definitely.
Sure.
But
look at the patient. All right, so let's talk about Eraserhead, right? Like the scene where Jack Nance is getting on the elevator, and just like you see the elevator, you see it, and it's like doors close, and it's like, oh my god, like what? And it seems like you're like, what the fuck is happening right now? I'm watching a dude get into an elevator. What is that? What is fucking happening? And then he later takes that unease and puts it towards creating a world that kind of makes you thinking about larger ideas.
Yeah.
And playing with your expectations of like what is to come.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. But like, but coming back to the original point for all that. Yeah. Like it's, you can do a lot with black and white, but this is one of the movies that kind of prove that.
Yeah.
By him doing kind of what was considered not a lot with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you were to say like, hey, I'm going to make this movie and I'm going to show this like, Hicksville nowhere town and just like how nobody's in it and it's dying. That sounds terrible. I don't want to see that movie. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But you watch it and you're like, fuck, yeah, this is
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, this is what's up.
Yeah. It's real, man. This is real.
Because you're vibing on the fact that like these kids and centered around these kids like live in this world, and like there's just this implied oppressiveness to it that you know that like something bad's gonna happen, and not like you know Jason Voorhees is gonna jump out, but it's just like they're gonna make some decisions,
Now,
and
that would have been an amazing twist.
where's that mashup, right? but in the same way, yeah, you're gonna make decisions that you think are small decisions and have large, far-reaching implications of your life. And here's the thing that's crazy about this: nobody was looking for that in 71.
Yeah,
people weren't looking for like long-term ramifications of their life. It was like, yeah, no, just be free, man. It's cool. Like, we're doing cool shit. Like, nobody was like looking to think about that. And that's what made this so special. And that's one of the reasons why when I say it's out of time, choose my words carefully, because it is somewhat out of time.
Yeah.
But half of that is just him loving like the work of these like filmmakers from like earlier times.
Yeah.
That had this sort of like resting state of like poignancy to them.
Well,
and like just his version of that, which is like, how could it not be of his time by him doing it? Because he's very much coming from a place of like not trying to ape that style, but to do it his way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, I think that, oh gosh, there's a lot there that I want to kind of.
No. I got beer to drink. So go ahead.
That was great, and I just to unpack a little bit of that, because I think that you're right. You know, when you say nobody really was looking for this at this time, because I thinking about some of these other movies that we've mentioned from that time, like Easy Rider, which does not necessarily give you a positive perspective on the world, but it's okay. So now, just to blow the ending once again for those of you who are just
spoiler alert, everybody.
Tonight we're blowing the ending of Easy Rider consistently on this show.
Yeah, exactly.
So the two characters, Dennis Hopper, Peter Fonda, they get blown away at the end of that movie. They get shot at the side of the road. So they die, and which is obviously tragic and awful, but that's it. And Bonnie and Clyde at the end of the movie, they die. They get shot as well at the end of that movie at the side of the road. Also, a lot of people getting shot at the side of the road in America.
It was an epidemic at the time.
Yeah, it was a big problem at the time.
It's a real problem.
Yeah, and then, but in Last Picture Show, I will say there is a death at the end of the movie. But it's not the main character, and the big thing about the movie is that people just go on. Like
life goes on, man.
Yeah.
Life goes on. What is it? Long after the thrill of living is gone.
Yes, that's right. Wait a second. Wait, what?
Mellencamp. I think it's Mellencamp.
Oh yeah. Jack and Diane. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
not a huge kook fan. That's a fucking great line, man.
It's a big
that's a great line.
Iconic.
I'd be if I wrote a line like that in a song, you'd be like, fuck yeah.
Well, that's Americana as well, right? I mean, that's kind of a good. Jack and Diane is kind of a good companion to this movie to some degree.
This is not obviously when that was written, but it's certainly and it's indicative of like what Mellencamp was kind of going for, right? Which is like small town stuff, but he has like this mythology that comes with it.
Yeah.
Right. That like has a little more like expectations, it's a little more cheese stick that way. Like,
yes. Yes. That's true. That is true.
But anyway, I'm taking you off task for that. But like
no, well, so there is that, and then so there were other like sort of black and white movies, I guess. Like I'm thinking Young Frankenstein's a black and white movie from that time, but that is definitely. It's about saying we're making a movie like a 1930s Universal horror.
But imagine these awesome Universal movies that we and the parlance of our times all grew up on. But imagine if they were like hilarious. Imagine if they were funny, like and had like the kind of humor that we like. Yeah, and that's Young Frank. And it seems so simple, but it's like obviously it's A-list talent, at the top of their game. Like Mel Brooks is. Yeah, he's great at what he does. Like he does a thing, you can love it, you can think it's overrated, but like he does that thing better than almost anyone.
Yes, I think that for me, anyways, I think Young Frankenstein is maybe my favorite of his movies. But
it's great.
Yeah, but it does seem like if you were doing black and white at that time, it tended to be some kind of like I'm making a direct reference to something very specific from a different time. And yes, The Last Picture Show is set in the 1950s when there were a lot of black and white films. But as you say, it's not black and white. It's not a black and white film quite like that. So it is both connected to that time and also different from that time as well.
Well, it was the Heisenberg effect. The act of observing something changes it, right? So this
Yeah.
is folks in the early 70s observing, the idea of the 50s and like looking
Yeah.
at it with everything they've learned.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I've directed maybe things too much here. So, is there something about this movie that you would like to that I haven't brought up that you'd like to talk about?
I mean, we touched everything I could think of. I mean, I think it's well, I'll just redouble down on other points I made that like this is a vibe movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like as people like discover movies that maybe never got their day in the sun as vibe movies, like this is absolutely like there's going to be some big resurgence for Last Picture Show, I think, in the next couple of years where people are like, wow, like this is I mean, not that there isn't, like, if you're into film, but I mean, I'm talking about from like a larger perspective. Like it's probably something like some movies in Diaz and like references it or some shit like that. But like, whatever, however it gets there, it's going to get people in the door and they're going to be blown away. But you know what? I said the same thing about Badlands for years, and all we got was Natural Born Killers, which I do like, but
well,
it's like the new metal version of Badlands.
So
retroactively,
I'll put out another movie that is,
and I like it, but it's man, it's like one step from something I don't like.
Yeah. It's another. I mean, I haven't seen Natural Born Killers since I was in high school, so I can't. It's hard for me to comment on it. But it was a good movie for a high school student.
As a high school student, I'm like, fuck yes, this is my shit. I love it. And then like I grew up.
Yeah, and I would much rather watch Badlands than I would rewatch Badlands than. But
and Badlands, by having less to say, has more to say.
Oh, yeah.
The biggest problem with Natural Born Killers is that he's trying to get so much stuff out.
Yeah.
That like there are times that it plays well, like in the whole like Rodney Dangerfield as an abusive dad and it's played like a sitcom thing. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
But then like there are parts of it are just so fucking heavy-handed where it's like, look, I get it and I agree with you, but it's enough.
Yeah.
But then there's like, look at like the Robert Downey Jr. character who's like, the hard copy current affairs like reporter guy. And like that was at the dawn of that era, which that is now what cable news is. So it's prescient in its way. I'm not trying to shit on Natural Born Killers necessarily. Yeah. It's just that like it's a kind of movie that you wish it was like one or two clicks smarter. Or just like one or two clicks less heavy-handed. Whereas Badlands is just like, why is that movie only like grown in stature over there? I mean, I think Martin Sheen still considers his best performance, which is like crazy because that dude's been in a bazillion things.
Yeah.
But because it fulfills the criteria of you care about the characters at the same time they're doing these abhorrent things.
Yeah.
And it isn't like they're not doing it because like, hey y'all, let's do some evil. They have their motivation for it. And so it's like the rise of the anti-hero. And that's what makes that interesting. So coming all back around to Last Picture Show.
Yeah.
It would not work if like everyone was cool. Like everyone looks cool now and is saying cool stuff all the time and like whatever. Even if they're not, it's haha, self-aware. I'm not cool because I'm self-aware that I'm not cool. And like there's no hint of self-awareness to any of this. There's just this almost naivete to it that I think it's like the secret sauce. Like it makes it something like extraordinary. And I say that because I think if he had made this movie 4 years later, I think it's a different movie.
Oh yeah.
I think if you made it 2 years earlier, it would have been a way different movie. But like, it's the perfect time for him to have made it with the perfect and like think of like what the people in this film did like afterwards, right? Crazy.
Yeah.
like the tendrils of this film. But like everyone's like, hey, you know what's good? Last Picture Show. Oh yeah, that is good. Yeah, Last Picture Show is good. That's good.
And a lot of these people were not actually particularly well known when he actually. I don't think any of them were except for Sam Johnson, who had been in westerns, but even still, like probably largely forgotten. He's playing into what I read. He's playing into that Orson Welles thing because I just recently rewatched Citizen Kane again, and at the end of that movie, it's just that movie is pretty good. You know that?
Hey, it's a good movie, Citizen Kane. It's real good. Check it out.
We do the
Through obscure.
controversial takes here at
Yeah,
JHTTM.
exactly.
But
bold opinion.
I'm just gonna pause things for just a second and say Citizen Kane.
Right. Here's my hot take.
Yeah. But at the end of that movie, and at the end of I think most Orson Welles movies that I've seen, a lot of them from that time anyway, he does this like Citizen Kane starring, and then he shows the people on screen. And Bogdanovich does the same thing in the Last Picture Show. And at the time with Citizen Kane, he's like, I'm going to introduce you to the people in my theater group. And here's Joseph Cotten. And then Joseph Cotten goes on to do, you know, Shadow of a Doubt, The Third Man, and all these kinds of movies. But
it takes a special point of, which that's something, if I may interrupt that, sorry, that Quentin Tarantino does that too.
Yes.
Even though in some cases he's doing like bringing in actors and actresses from like, you know, the grindhouse like world that he loves that most people don't, but like does that in a way of like makes a big show of it, of like, hey, this is part of the, which I kind of dig, you know. I think I kind of dig that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
And I always like Tarantino to bringing back people who you'd kind of forgotten about.
Yeah, you're like, oh shit! Like they brought back, you know, like you know, at the time when like Jackie Brown came out, where it was like, oh shit, what, Pam Grier? Fuck yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And she's great in it, you know. It's like one of her best
phenomenal.
roles.
She's phenomenal, yeah, definitely.
But she never stopped being great. It's just that, like, you know, she just getting offered great roles.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, that was a great strength of his. I don't know if has he done that as much recently, where he brings back somebody who has kind of been forgotten. I don't know if he has.
I mean, he definitely has brought in people. I mean, nobody knew who the fuck Christoph Waltz was before.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Inglourious Bastards, and like now everyone's like, oh, Christoph Waltz is great, and because you know why? Because he's fucking great.
He is.
And
yeah.
Even like had oh god, what's his name? He directs the Hostel and all that.
Hold on.
That dude.
Yes.
But point, like I think he still does it, but it's like he's more particular about who he kind of plucks out and where, and kind of in a way that, like, I mean, doesn't he have? And God, I'm sorry, we're talking about Quentin Tarantino so much, but like he doesn't have a thing where he like feels like he's gonna make only a certain amount of movies and then call it, which I'm like fuck you, will, sure,
right,
whatever, dude. I'm sure you will.
I think he's said enough about that now that I think he's gonna feel forced to do it.
Yeah. Okay, sure. So he can have his big comeback movie. That, well, this is the one that I came back for. Like,
I think that's a possibility. Yeah, I think that can happen.
That dude, like, love him or hate him, that dude lives and breathes film.
That's
right.
True.
Like, try to keep that guy. Be like, hey, you know what? I think this is gonna be my last record. Oh, sure it will. Yeah. Okay.
I also don't fully agree with his reason why. Like, the reason he gives is he's like, because people great directors stop making great movies after a while, which is true for a lot of them.
In some cases, yeah.
But it's not true for all of them. It's not true for Scorsese, for example.
No. And I mean, I think there's probably so many examples where it is true that like I get see, well, and it's by him saying that he gets to be a little bit of a brat and kind of, you know, kind of throw stones without throwing stones. And I get it. But
let me tell you about how much I know about movies. No great filmmaker made a great movie after the age of 60. But yeah, it's not. I like Tarantino a lot. I don't agree with that.
I don't
agree with that assessment. I mean,
I think I like him a lot, and like I'll go out of my way to not have to defend him as well. You know, it's like that kind of thing where it's like I don't really want to talk about Quentin Tarantino. Sorry,
I know.
Like the character of the dude, like I'm not interested in that. I think he makes great, interesting movies, and is somehow rated exactly right, and maybe slightly underrated.
Yes.
As a dude, I don't know. I don't fucking hang out with him.
Well,
maybe he's great. Seems like you wouldn't get a word in edgewise, but I know people like that.
True.
You know?
That's true. Okay, let me tell you something about film. Okay, I think that's
think about Sonny Chiba that nobody understands. Oh my god, there's not enough beer in the world to continue this conversation.
I read a quote about Bogdanovich. It was Billy Wilder. I'm reading it now. Billy Wilder said, "It isn't true that Hollywood is a bitter place divided by hatred, greed, and jealousy. All it takes to bring the community together is a flop by Peter Bogdanovich. Which means people were just waiting for that guy to fail.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably true of Tarantino as well. I think that everybody would love it if Tarantino made a
absolutely. I mean, look, like we mentioned earlier that like the reason why Tarantino got invoked in the first place because like at one point Tarantino was like the hip in like cool kid, right? Even though that's not his background at all, Bogdanovich absolutely was that dude of his time.
Yeah, I think there's something about like a guy who
maybe less obnoxious.
But, like a guy.
And I say that as a fan of Tarantino. Like I love his, because most of his targets it's pretty well deserving, and he's honestly I'm like twice as sarcastic as that guy, right? And I'm the most earnest dude ever. But it's like the fact that you don't hear someone at that level that's still gonna call it like he sees it. Like that was a big inflection point and turning point for that era of filmmaking.
Yeah,
I mean, Robert Rodriguez is talented as well, but you never hear him talking shit.
Well, I mean, he made Spy Kids, so
he did. Indeed, he did.
But there's like Tarantino and Bogdanovich, and they are definitely students of film, and I think to a certain degree, that can carry you a long way. But I think after a while, there's an audience out there who are like, you don't know everything there is to know about film. So that when Bogdanovich, when Bogdanovich puts out a movie that doesn't do well, they're like, you said, it's like, it's like when Oasis put out a bad album in the 90s, like we were just waiting for this.
You guys thought you were cool. You weren't.
Right. Yeah. So it's I think there's that thing going on. And Bogdanovich, may he rest in peace, was I think that kind of a guy. Like he but he did know what he was talking about, just like Tarantino knows what he's talking about.
Well, absolutely. And like I like that, he used his capital to do cool, like no one else could have made a 4-hour documentary about Tom Petty.
There you go.
Like, what? No, you can't fucking do what? No, I'm not gonna fund that. But it's like, oh, Bogdanovich is doing it. All right, I can't wait to see what that looks like.
I'm there. Yeah.
Because it's like at that point he wasn't like doing a lot of directing or whatever. He was like, I'm good. I'm just gonna like show up in The Sopranos and be this cool character and just kind of do things I feel like doing when I feel like doing it. Isn't that what retirement's all about? By the way,
that's true.
It's not about sitting around doing nothing. It's like, I'm not going to do anything I don't feel like doing.
That's right.
Fucking cool. I'm going to do that now.
Go for it, Conan. I
know. I would in a heartbeat.
I thought that's what this was. I thought
that's definitely true in my podcasting world.
There you go.
Which is the key. The only reason why anyone gives a shit about my show also is people are like, wow, it's so, and they try to like, they do like the algebra meme, trigonometry kind of figure it out. I'm like, I just have people on that I'm interested in. That's it.
That's pretty awesome.
Like that's the key to the show. Because otherwise, like if I'm not interested in them, like what I'm gonna do? Like small talk.
Right. Well, and that's actually my attitude with this. Maybe I'll make a video about this someday, but that's what you just said about not hate watching things. It's the same thing with this channel, which is that I'm making a conscious effort to talk about things that I like because I
appreciate that. I actually have noticed and appreciate that. Like I think that's sorry to just I appreciate it so much. I say to interrupt you about it.
No, I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you did
because I think that there's a tendency towards, especially with film, to be like, here's why I hate this movie, or here's why this movie sucks, or why is this so awful?
Yeah.
And like ostensibly I'm at the tail end of it, but like maybe it's like a Gen X burnout thing. I was over that before I got out of high school. I'm like, you know what? I'd rather hear about what people are into. What are you into? What do you like and why do you like it? That I'm interested in. Like I'm not into this whole like hot take industrial complex, which again, everyone had been trained to I want to immediately give my opinion on this.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm very happy not to have opinions on certain things. I'm like, you know what? I don't have to have an opinion on that.
Right. It's okay.
It's fine. Maybe,
It's
do I
okay.
like it? Do I dislike it? I don't know. I'm not
Right.
haven't given any energy to it at all.
Right.
I'm like, that's okay. You know why? Because I give a lot of energy to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I give my all to it. So
Yeah.
if I give my energy to everything, I would basically, by average, give my energy to nothing.
That's true. Spreading yourself thin.
And especially with how things are now, by like negative reacting to something, you're still giving it airtime.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're you know, like it's the clicks still count, whether they're love clicks or hate clicks.
Absolutely. But I'll tell you this, I'm definitely canceling my Sharknado episode next week.
Oh man, you should have. Lindsay could probably tell you some verbatim quotes that yeah, because we watched that. And
I've never seen that either.
Oh, it's the worst thing I've ever seen, and I've seen the Brown Bunny. And the Brown Bunny was pretty, and I was pretty fear. The Fountain I fucking despised as well. But like it had I was apoplectic. I mean, I was like I am furious that this exists.
Yes, you were really,
and I was doubly furious because I could see like down the line, I'm like, there's gonna be sequels of this, and that makes me fucking angry. Like yes. I was visibly upset about it. Like I was like, this is a turd that is like, hey everybody, look at this. This is a turd. Look at our turd that we have. Isn't it stink like shit? That's because it's a turd, everybody. Like, and people
I gotta
write
down the timing because I'm clipping that. Okay. All right. Good. Perfect.
and people were like, cool, I'm gonna watch that turd. I'm like, stop fucking watching turds. Stop fucking rewarding this shit. Literally.
Yeah.
It is shit, and that's all you need to know. Piece of shit, move on. To quote,
but I do think it is like it's hard to talk about why something is good. Like it is just harder to say why you think something is good than to say why it's bad. Like it's easy to say,
we talked about it in that for like 5 minutes, and I'm like, why did I like it?
Why did I like this? Yeah, it's not necessarily
batshit insane, and it's like one half step this way, and I fucking hate it. Like, but it's perfect. Why do I love Torch? Like Torch is so great as a band. Like they're the fact that they meld like the heavy and the hooks and whatever, but it's like, yeah, one step more over this way
and it wouldn't be good.
And it wouldn't work for me. Right. It's not that it would be bad, it still wouldn't work for me. And why doesn't it work for me? Fuck if I know.
Right.
Do I want to ever describe that movie to anyone? Fuck no, I don't.
Right.
But I'll be like, hey, it's one of my favorite movies of last year. It was awesome.
So you're saying you don't want me to put you down for the Annette episode then?
I mean, look, I, as a huge Sparks fan, I feel like it's my civic duty to be involved in any panel where Sparks are tangentially involved. Ron and Russell come on Protonic Reversal.
I can tell you right now, he ain't watching this show.
No, those guys, yeah. Neither Sparks Bro.
Well, maybe if you're on, but I don't think they're regular watchers of J Hutch Talks too much.
Fair. I will say, I shouldn't say fucking shit about shit, but I've come tantalizingly close to having the Mail Brothers on Protonic Reversal, and that would be. I guarantee you that. Let's put it this way: that will be as great of an episode or series of episodes as the Jerry Casale one, if that comes to pass. I am the guy. There's no other person exists that has a show of that nature that would be better at it. I fucking guarantee you. I'm not saying that to be conceited. I'm saying that because, like Bogdanovich, I know where I'm at, and I call my shot.
There you go. All right. It's out there, folks, if you're watching.
Ron and Russell, come on the show. It'll be fucking cool. It'd be like hanging out with Edgar, but not.
It was pretty cool to see Chris Murphy, though, and he came through you, and he was on your podcast as well. A couple times, right?
Yeah, and what I loved about that is that we talked about the Scott Pilgrim thing when he was on Protonic,
mm-hmm.
but it was sort of like when there's so much to get to, and when someone has such a vast and like cool catalog and is like willing to talk about it and somewhat self-aware of it, but like also like, you know, entertaining about talking about it, you don't want to spend too much time on any one thing. But I was like, I'm so fascinated by like you basically teaching non-musicians how to look like musicians for this movie that I love, that I fucking love. And the fact that like at least 2 of the 3 cases, it's like they look like the real deal. That when it came up, I mean, I was the one that suggested, I was like, hey, you know, if you want to do like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, like I bet I can talk Chris Murphy into coming on, because I don't think he's ever done that for a thing.
Right.
And I like that kind of stuff. I like that kind of like, here's a single serving kind of here's Kira from Black Flag, who like won an Oscar for Mad Max Fury Road, talking about ADR. Most people don't know what ADR is. It's like, oh yeah, like the fucking one of the bass players for Black Flag and like Dose and like just one of the coolest characters in punk rock has like a really cool like latter-day career. Right. And it's doing this crazy cool thing that nobody thinks about for a movie that everybody loves. And like, that's awesome. And I love that kind of thing, because a lot of times the value that people get at Protonic is like hearing what people do when they're not doing the thing that they love them for. Mm-hmm. You know, like, I mean, like things like Greg Norton being like, oh, I didn't pick up a bass for like 10 years. I opened up a restaurant.
Yeah.
Husker do. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Right. Like, like you just didn't touch a bass. You're like, no. And it's like, oh, I picked up to move it. I'm like, oh, okay.
Wow. Yeah, that is cool.
Okay. So to have someone like Chris who's like game for it, like talk about something so great like Scott Pilgrim, which is like stylistically like just a fucking, like, I wish that movie had been a huge success. I think it would have changed filmmaking for 10 years.
Right.
And talk about that side of it. Fucking rad. Great.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I'm the kind of guy that people like telling that kind of stuff too. So cool.
That's awesome. So,
you know,
I mean, I could say it, but you say it. Where can people find Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal?
Protonicreversal.com. Anywhere you find your podcast. I went video for in like mid 2020. So there's a YouTube channel. So subscribe and like stuff on there. I'm not treating it so much like an afterthought anymore. You know, Spotify, Apple Music, podcast, whatever they have. So what's funny, like, I've done this show almost 8 years, like, and like the entire world of how people like get podcasts has changed like 2 or 3 times. So I don't ever get too specific into it. I'm just like, get it wherever you get your podcasts.
Right.
There's a lot of cool shit. Like, you know, Bowie, his birthday was, you know, a couple days ago in the time of this airing. And like, I was like, oh yeah, there was a really good episode Tony Visconti I did, who was like his producer and like close friend. And like, I was like, that was a real like deep nerd. Like, let me ask you about this specific thing about David Bowie. Like, you know, kind of like, like that if you're into that kind of thing, I'm like, I bet people would like this if I posted this. And so there's a lot of stuff like that. I kind of forget about shit that I did all the time, frankly, because at a certain point, like I was doing that much of it. But I will say it's interesting to have been doing it for so long, but have people find it in this fucking weird ass time that we live in. Yeah. And have it get some value and comfort to an uncertain time. That's amazing.
Well, and I think that it is a cool approach, because you know, as somebody who's a fan of music myself, you see people that you really admire and they're being interviewed, and it's always the same questions. And
it makes me fucking mental. I'm like, oh my god, I'm just like, yeah, exactly. I feel the same way, right?
The Sharknado of interviews, and and it's the same answer. You know, they've got their sort of ready to go replies for those moments, but
and sometimes there's like it derivates a little here or there,
a little different. But if you're asking them questions that are not the same questions that they're used to hearing, then they're going to go someplace different with it, probably.
And it ends up being a totally different kind of discussion. And if there's a strength to the show, it's because of that, and because I have the lived experience of having, you know, not that like I'm some household name or something, but I've done this like nonstop. Yeah. Well, I shouldn't say nonstop, because the last 2 years have basically been a full stop for the past like 22 years, right? Like I've lived that life. So I come out from a very different place, and I never like sought out to be a great podcaster or thought I'm going to be podcast famous or what, whatever the fuck that would mean or anything along those lines. I was just like, I'm going to make the kind of show I want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it turns out other people want to hear it. So great.
That's amazing.
I'm as surprised as anyone.
That's a good attitude. Now,
just like with movie night extravaganza, right? It's like this is the kind of movie show that I would listen to. In fact, I did listen to it even when I wasn't on it. Like I was like, I like this show, and then I ended up being on it, so that ruined that. But but it's it's funny, it's irreverent, it's unpredictable. Like it goes to like weird, but it's clever, it's interesting. Like I mean.
Well, it's movie night extravaganza that's why I decided to do this, because it's like, okay, just what we were talking about before. Like these are people who are enjoying these movies,
right?
They're enjoying talking about it. They're having fun talking about it, which is always good to see. Because if people are not enjoying the experience, it's just not that fun to watch. But it's
not great. Yeah. Well, but I like what I like about this is that like it hits differently. It's more in depth, and like part of this is like whatever. There's 50,000 people on that fucking show at any given moment of time, right? So half the time you see me, I'm just getting like a witty rejoinder, and everyone laughs, and like whatever. Yeah, great.
Right.
Like I and there's something to be said for that. I love it, but
it's great.
It's a lively show. It moves quick. Like I think about it in terms of not that it is meant to sound like that at all, but like the vibe is taking the idea of something like the Howard Stern show or something, where it's just meant to be like lively and fun and real. Like when I'm doing the Letterboxd reviews and we go off in these like 3-minute derivations into other shit, like that's great.
Yeah,
I'm not mad about it. I'm like that's awesome.
Yeah.
like that's what do you think this is for? This is for like a discussion, like, and the unpredictability is part of it, but it also comes to the fact that there's a deep love from everyone that's involved.
Yes,
that's why I'm involved. Like that's why I didn't being like I just showed up more and more and more, and eventually they handed me the keys. Like I was like, all right, because I'd be like, hey, I would literally message for us. Here's the things I loved, and here's these things that I think I didn't quite love so much. That here's why I didn't love them. Maybe you care, maybe you don't.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great, very entertaining. It's a very entertaining podcast. It does move fast. I was on it once and I could not keep up. But
it's almost too fast for me, and that's saying a lot. And but what's great about this is like you get this is very in depth. It's not like this. This is like like mammoths walking across the fucking tundra or nothing.
Right.
But like it gets very in depth, and that's so there's something to be said. Like it's a different kind of conversation when it's person to person.
Yeah, and I think actually, based on sort of when you were making that observation about Eraserhead and the elevator,
the fucking elevator scene, which I love. I fucking love that so much because it's so fucking stupid.
But I think
it's so great.
Like in this, movies used to have different rhythms to it. You could have a fast rhythm like Breathless, or you could have a slow rhythm like A Woman Under the Influence, which you guys did on your show. Very slow moving movie. One of my favorite movies is both of them, Breathless and A Woman Under the Influence,
for so different reasons, right?
For incredible, and they move at entirely different paces. But now it seems like it has to be at the same pace all the time. Like if a movie comes out today, it has to be all at the same pace. And I like to slow things down a little bit. So I think that
I dig that. I dig, and that's a dude. I like the fast songs. I like the slow songs.
Right.
Right, because we talked. I had like sort of like all the things I want to talk about, and we talked about all of them. I talked a bunch of other shit too, and it's all. And I think it's pretty cool. It's interesting. Yeah. It's all, and you get that kind of free flowing stuff when you allow. I say leave room for the Lord. Like
exactly
the Christian side hug people say leave room for the Lord, but
no, you get a lot. There's a lot of places you can go.
I mean, don't get me wrong, man. Like especially if I'm doing like album promo or something, I can just show up at a show and fucking shoot my shit, and I'll get a couple good one-liners in, and it's funny, and everyone has a good time, and great. For me, like that's not that interesting.
Right. Yeah.
So like, and this is an additional piece of pressure I put on myself, that it's like I want each thing to be a little special some way.
Right. Right.
And sometimes that means you're putting work into it. Like sometimes
Sure.
and others, the best way to put it, right? But no, I like the in-depth shit. I like I like the big lively panels where you have like back and forths and in jokes and callbacks and all that. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. If you got a commute or something and you're just trying to be like, oh, fucking don't want to be at work today. I'm gonna be at work soon. I'm fucking not stoked about that at all. And like
Yeah.
you get like people talking about like thirst trapping Dark Crystal characters on Letterboxd. Great. That's
Right.
that.
Yeah. No, it's phenomenal. I mean,
like I'm all for it. That's
this
awesome.
is just I like how this is it's a back and forth of us saying how good each other's shows are. But I do think
but it's a different but it's a way different vibe, right? It's a way different,
different vibe.
And like getting into why is Last Picture Show a movie everyone should see, even though it basically sounds like the most depressing thing in the face of the planet.
Yeah.
Because it has not only a couple of things well, but here's the reasons why it's culturally and societally significant, without like starting off as like, in this essay I shall share.
Right, exactly. No, yeah, I definitely want to avoid that, because that's the stuff that I do outside of this, and I don't want to.
There's nothing wrong. I mean, there's a time and there's a place for it.
A time and a place, yeah.
When it comes down to these kinds of shows, that's the same for me, man. Like,
yes,
I'd rather hear like 25 different derivations into like think about the Red Hot Chili Peppers is what? Why is that relevant? And then it comes back and you're like, wow, I never expected that to land, but there it went. That's by the way, is basically my musical career.
Well, I think that's where you have to go as a creative person, though, right?
I mean, if you operate. Yeah, if you operate out of okay, so Tick Tick Boom, right? We talked about Tick Tick Boom because I was basically trying to talk about Annette, but I talked about everyone wants to talk about Tick Tick Boom, and I'm like, well, it's Lin-Manuel Miranda sized, sure.
I don't see why not.
Which, I mean, he fucking directed it, so of course it should be, right? But it's got all his like Sonic hallmarks. I like it in spite of that. But there's a real cool, I guess this would be a spoiler, like as a not for Easy Rider, but for a movie that's actually actively out there, a lot of people haven't seen.
Right.
But Judith Light, who plays his agent, like he finally goes through and has like his show, and he's like, oh great, who's gonna produce it? It's gonna be huge, whatever. And she's basically like, yeah, they can't wait to hear what the next thing is. And it's like, and it's like, yeah, it's too dense, it's too weird. People just want hits, like, et cetera. And there's a great little conversation. It's like, but the thing is, it's not about, what do you next? We start working on the next thing.
Right.
And like, that's something that like, and it's a little hokified, frankly, because it's like big Hollywood production. And like, the next thing he did was Tick Tick Boom, and the next thing after that was Rent, but he died like the day before it came out, which is tragic and whatever. So there has to be some like Hollywood thing of like, all right, but eventually he made a big thing. All right. In reality, that isn't how it works. But like, just the idea of like, I like seeing that on a popular movie that's like, yeah, you just got to work on the next thing, which is, I was like, respect, because that's what it actually is. Being an artist is actually like that. Like you can't. Something becomes your world, you become like super invested in it, and it does something, or more likely it doesn't, and you just have to fucking move on, and you have to just do the next thing, and like it's not that you throw it away, but you just move on to the next thing. If you can continue doing that, then you're an artist. It doesn't mean you're going to be happy, but it means you're an artist, because that's what it is, really.
Well, and just to tie this back to the topic, not that we have to.
Yeah, sorry for the Tick Tick Boom.
I don't mind, but
also spoiler: there's a fucking bunch of dudes dancing and singing, and like if you like fucking musical theater, it's for you. And I'm
also spoiler alert that I just found out. Angela from Who's the Boss is in it apparently. So
Judith Light. That's Andrew Garfield's agent, and her character's great. And like she's had a great recent career turn as a character actress, and I'm here for it because so Judith Light is her name.
Judith Light. That's right. So now to tie it back to, like, again with Bogdanovich, I'll make this last point, and then if you want to once again,
You can do whatever. It's your fucking show. You can do whatever you want. You don't need to apologize to me.
I also like that that's your key line too on Movie Night Extravaganza.
I mean, like half the time he's like, "Hey, is it cool if I do that?" I don't know. You tell me, man. I'm just here to look pretty and crack wise. I do at least one of those things well.
But you know, you have Bogdanovich, who is a student of Orson Welles, and I'd say that in many ways both of those filmmakers made quite a few good movies, but in some ways were always tied to one, were always remembered for one. And you know, obviously with Welles it was Citizen Kane, and even though he made Magnificent Ambersons and Chimes at Midnight and other great movies, Lady from Shanghai, you know, he was always kind of living in the shadow of Citizen Kane. And Bogdanovich, I'd say the same thing with The Last Picture Show, even though he made other great movies like Targets, Paper Moon, What's Up, Doc. And as you say, though, like both of them kept going, and they struggled because, you know, they were working within a system that they needed a lot of money to finance their films. But they kept making them. And you look through Bogdanovich's filmography, you'll find a lot of stuff. You'll find the music documentaries. You'll find all this kind of stuff.
It's never bad. It's always interesting. Yeah.
So he kept going, and although I would still say, just as Citizen Kane was the great masterwork of Orson Welles, that Last Picture Show to me,
it's fuck out of here. It's got to be. It's look, there's a reason why it's in all the film school books, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes things like are rated exactly right, even when they're like very well rated.
And it's one of those movies that for me, like when the movie ends, although it's not necessarily the happiest of endings, it makes me feel good that somebody could make a movie like this. And there's a few movies that are like that, but this is one of them.
Yeah, it's satisfying in its way, like in what it does, and not bad, you know.
Yeah,
not bad.
Exactly. So we've talked about your various ventures, but if you would like to, so Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal on all the places where you can get your podcast,
all the stuff, yes. And
YouTube. Subscribe and like the videos there. Feel free to subscribe to this if you haven't, and like it as well if you're watching. And Movie Night Extravaganza, if you haven't subscribed to that.
Sub to that. That show can use it more than Protonic.
That's
honestly, that show's a lot newer too. It's only like 6 months old, which is fucking nuts.
And can I say for the record, I was the first subscriber to Movie Night Extravaganza. I can say that.
And first in my heart as well.
I believe you're contractually obligated to say that, I think, due to some cash flow going on, but that's another story.
The flow never comes to me; it only goes out. Just to be
fair. All right, fair enough.
let's not get it twisted.
And Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. Any new material coming out?
Yeah, there's a split EP called Dangerous Nomenclature that is coming out in the next next month or two. I don't know exactly when it is, but it's there's a song on Bandcamp, which is neutronfriends.bandcamp.com, called The Commuter. That's the first thing we've released since Dark Passengers, and that was October 2020. So but we're gonna make it for last time pretty quickly. There's gonna be like a split LP, another EP, and well, if I get off my ass and record it, the whole nother record too. But that's gonna be coming real soon. So neutronfriends.bandcamp.com. I say that most people are gonna listen on Spotify. That's what people do. So share crop with me. That'll be on all the Spotify stuff as well. I'm just always happy if anybody pays any attention at all. So yeah, whatever.
Well, I highly encourage people to look that up and to keep following your work. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
You're my first guest that I've never met in real life. So this is
interesting.
This is an achievement.
All right, we got to keep that going. I'm never going to meet you now.
Yeah. Well, okay. Fair enough.
I'm gonna be like, oh, Hutch is coming in. Fuck it, I'm out of here.
Look, that's what the people say who have met me. So I mean,
It's a smoke bomb, by the way.
okay.
Just there. No,
I think it'll be worth it just for that. I'm excited.
I mean, I earnestly hope that COVID times notwithstanding, that at some point we can hang out in the future. And
yeah, definitely.
But thank you for having me on. Nonetheless, this is a blast. I love this movie, and I think it was a good conversation.
It was great, and thanks so much for coming on. I hope you come back again sometime. If not,
let
for
me know.
The Torpedo episode, for something else. And yeah, that would be fantastic.
I ain't doing shit till like late spring, other than like 15 million episodes of different podcasts. So,
well, you can fit in one more then. I'm sure.
Yeah. What's one more? What's just one tiny mint? Just one little wafer.
There's a movie. We could talk about that one too.
Yeah, all day long, twice on Tuesdays.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.